When Paul McCartney looks back on the Beatles, there's one word that often comes up: genius. Not just his own or John Lennon's, but the collective brilliance that happened when the four of them worked together. A rare, once-in-a-century chemistry. And while there are countless songs that capture that magic, Paul once said there was one song that truly proved the Beatles' genius. The track that showed how fearless, imaginative, and musically advanced they had become. That song was A Day in the Life. By 1967, the Beatles were no longer just a pop band. They were redefining what popular music could be. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was about to change the world, and at the heart of it sat A Day in the Life, the album's haunting cinematic finale. Paul McCartney has often said that this song was where everything came together: John's darkness, Paul's optimism, George Martin's genius, and Ringo's subtle brilliance. It wasn't just another hit single, it was art. A Day in the Life began as two separate ideas. John had written a fragment inspired by news stories, one about a car crash, another about the endless cycle of modern life. Paul, meanwhile, had a nostalgic middle section about waking up, getting out of bed, dragging a comb across my head. Individually, they were opposites: Lennon's dreamlike melancholy and McCartney's everyday realism. But when they stitched them together, something magical happened. Two halves of one creative soul, chaos and clarity, became a masterpiece. Paul has always spoken with awe about how A Day in the Life came together in the studio. It wasn't just songwriting, it was experimentation. The orchestra, 40 musicians playing from the lowest note to the highest all at once, was McCartney's idea. He wanted something that sounded like the end of the world, a rush of sound that bridged John's verses and his own middle section. George Martin, the producer often called the fifth Beatle, turned that idea into a controlled explosion of chaos. They recorded multiple takes, layering strings, brass, and sound effects until it felt like the song was breaking open time itself. When it all came crashing down into that single, endless piano chord, 5 pianos struck simultaneously, ringing for nearly a minute. The band knew they'd done something historic. Years later, Paul said, "That song showed what we could really do when we were firing on all cylinders. It proved our genius, as a group, not as individuals." To him, A Day in the Life wasn't just a track, it was the Beatles distilled. One reason the song worked so perfectly was because it embodied both Lennon and McCartney's worlds. John's verses floated in surreal imagery: newspaper stories, car crashes, holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. Paul's section brought things back to earth: waking up, catching the bus, heading to work. It was life itself, the dream and the routine, the mystery and the mundane. That contrast was what made the Beatles extraordinary. They weren't just writing songs, they were capturing the human condition in 3 minutes of sound. McCartney later said that A Day in the Life felt like a dream where you suddenly wake up and find yourself in real life. That sense of movement, between worlds, between minds, was what made it transcend pop music. Paul never forgot the contributions of his bandmates and producer. He called George Martin's orchestral direction a stroke of genius, and Ringo's drumming one of the most sensitive performances ever. Indeed, Ringo's fills on A Day in the Life are among his finest, unpredictable yet perfectly placed, echoing Lennon's drifting vocals. Every detail, every choice was deliberate. Paul saw in this process the essence of the Beatles' genius, that combination of curiosity, discipline, and sheer instinct that no one could replicate. They weren't following anyone, they were inventing the path. For McCartney, A Day in the Life also symbolized something bittersweet: the last time the band truly operated as one creative unit. He once said, "That was the peak. We were still in tune with each other. After that, things began to change." There's a moment during the recording where you can almost hear that unity. Lennon's ghostly voice floating through the verses, Paul's bright section bursting through the fog, Ringo's heartbeat rhythm holding it all together. It's the sound of 4 very different men creating something larger than themselves. Paul often pointed to that as the ultimate proof of what the Beatles were capable of. That when they set aside ego and just played, the result was pure genius. Decades later, the song still stands as one of the most acclaimed in history. Critics have called it the greatest Beatles song ever recorded, and Rolling Stone ranked it among the top songs of all time. McCartney himself never disagreed. He said, "That song was the moment I thought, yeah, this is why we're doing it. It was everything. Emotion, innovation, beauty, madness. It summed up what the Beatles were. Fearless innovators who could turn any idea, no matter how strange, into something unforgettable." Even today, when Paul performs it live, he treats it with a kind of reverence. He knows that A Day in the Life wasn't just a song. It was the Beatles saying goodbye to the ordinary and stepping into immortality. To Paul McCartney, A Day in the Life proved something simple yet profound. That genius isn't about complexity. It's about vision, unity, and daring to imagine something no one else can. It was proof that the Beatles weren't just a great band. They were the band, the moment when pop became art and music became eternal.